Hi there, it's me, Pat Miller, Gabby Gourmet, and we're at Stir Crazy in the kitchen. I can't believe that February is almost over, and lucky us, we are living the life at Roth Living as we see Chef Ben in their fabulous kitchens with, I guess, our star Ben and the other star, Lynn Thielen. Welcome, everybody.
How are you,
Yeah,
Gabby?
we all
So good to
survived
see
Valentine's.
you.
You too. We survived Valentine's Day
Yep, we survived.
and
We're,
President's
Right.
Week.
I know. It's like every week that ticks by, it's like, all right, we made it through that one. We made it through.
Well, here we are. Believe it or not, the last week of February.
Wild.
2021. I mean, you think it's never going to end, but God's help. But
Right.
Chef Ben, honey
Yes.
cumin roasted chicken with apricots and almonds.
We're gonna do the scallops first.
Well, what do I know? Okay, that's next week, fans. Scallop and tomato gratin. Okay.
Right? Classic, good, French style cuisine, very simple to make, doesn't really require a lot of fancy ingredients unless you include scallops among the fancy ingredients, but I don't, now that you can get them frozen at Costco, they don't fall into the fancy ingredient category
Okay, you
anymore.
know what? I'm really glad to know that because a friend of mine had just made scallops and it had me
Right.
for dinner. We're all flu shotted.
Right.
And all I want now is scallops.
The scallops. Well, the
I
thing is,
love scallops.
Okay, are they the big ones there?
you want the big ones. You definitely want the big ones. And you can, we live in a square state in the middle of the country. So obviously fresh fish is not really fresh, right? It's going to come from one coast or one gulf or somewhere, which is at least, a 4 or 5 hour plane ride away, which means that, fresh fish here is 3 days old. I mean, that's best circumstances, right? But so frozen is really a great option, especially now that the quality of frozen fish has really gotten so superior to what it used to be in the past. And Costco sells absolutely beautiful frozen sea scallops. They're 100% natural. There's no preservatives put on them, and so they're beautiful. They sear up nicely. They're not outrageously expensive. Because if you go out and buy fresh scallops, you can spend upwards of $20 to $25 a pound, and sometimes
Yeah, but really good scallops. Like 2 scallops or 3.
Right. So what I've done is I've gone out and I've gotten some of those scallops that are that were frozen at the time, and I just defrosted. They're very easy to defrost. You can literally just put them into a bowl and then run a stream of cold water into it. Let it run really slowly so the water sort of overflows. It creates a little convection in the water, and then the scallops will defrost very, very quickly. And so then you want to make sure that you take care of them properly. So you have your whole scallop here, and on the side, you'll notice there's this little attachment. It's a little muscle. It's actually what holds the scallop to its interior of the shell and all of those good things. You want to just make sure that that goes away. You don't want that little thing on the side. Just because it's a little bit tough, a little bit chewy.
You can see it to pull off?
You can it just peels right off the side. And not all of them will have it. Most of them will when the scallops are in good shape, but you definitely want to get that off of there. And so you have a nice, beautiful scallop like this. And so what we're going to do for this dish, as opposed to leaving them whole, we're going to slice them sort of, in sections. And, you want them about 1/4 of an inch thick. If you don't know what 1/4 of an inch is, just guess, but it's always better to have them a little bit thicker than a little bit too thin. They'll be easier to work with if they're a little thicker. If they're too thin, they tend to fall apart when you cook them. So what I've done is I've taken my scallops and I just laid them on a piece of parchment paper on a baking sheet, just like that. And while I'm doing this part, I've got a pan right next to me here that I'm very, very gently preheating to get it very, very nice and hot. So we can move forward on these scallops. Now, The important thing here is that when you're going to make this dish, you should gather all your ingredients and be prepared to put it all the way through from when you start cooking it all the way until it runs under the broiler and then comes out and goes straight onto the table. You don't want to let it sit around for too long. You want to basically just kind of let it flow through, but you don't need to do a lot of advanced prep work. There's just a little bit of chopping here and there, so it's pretty quick. Okay, so here's our scallops. We've got them all laid out. We're just going to take a little bit of salt and pepper, and we want to just give them a nice little seasoning. And again, the pan is still heating up gently as we go. Just a little bit of seasoning. And you only have to do one side because they're very thin, so you don't need to do both. All right. So then we've got just a little bit of flour because we want to just give them a little bit more color that they want to take on. And you just want to just sprinkle it over. You don't need to use very much. Just want to get a little dusting. And again, one side is plenty. Don't need to do both. Okay. All right. So again, what we've got prepped for this is we've got some shallots that we've diced up a little fine. We've got some garlic that we've diced. Now I'm using some canned Italian tomatoes, right? When I just scooped out 2 cups of those approximately from the can. I saved the rest of the juice they were packed in and just set it aside. But then I just took these and then crushed them with my hand and let them drain a little bit. In the summertime, when the tomatoes are super fragrant and really aromatic and have a lot of flavor, then I would recommend that you use fresh tomatoes. But here in winter, better to use the good canned Italian tomatoes. It's going to taste a lot better. And then we've got some parsley, Italian parsley, a little bit of Parmesan cheese. And then the last ingredient, and I want to make sure that I go through all the ingredients first, just because, as I said, it goes pretty quickly once you start moving on this dish, right? These are fresh breadcrumbs. These are not the kind of breadcrumbs you get in a can at the supermarket, but they're just a good loaf of bread. You want to take the crust off and throw it into the food processor while it's still soft. So you have fresh breadcrumbs, not dried breadcrumbs. That's really important to this dish because you want the texture, you want them to absorb a little more flavor. They don't get that kind of gummy, pasty sort of quality to them in their mouth. So you want to use those fresh breadcrumbs. And then the last thing, and obviously it's a French dish, we want a little good dry white wine, whatever you like to cook with. Remember, best kind of wine to cook with is the kind that you'll serve your friends without any regrets. Okay, that's the best kind of wine to serve, to cook with, right? Wine that you can.
I agree with that.
All right. So got all of our scallops are ready to go. We've got our pan getting nice and hot. At this point, you can use either one of 2 cooking oils. You can use some extra virgin olive oil should you choose to, or I'm going to use a little clarified butter because I just think that the butter flavor with the scallops is really nice, and it should be really hot, as you can see, right? Smoking nicely. We're going to add those scallops in there as quickly as you can, just that first side down, right?
It almost looks like you're working on a little baby 30-inch up there, Ben. It's
Yeah.
just
Little tiny range, right? I don't have
Yeah.
my big 60-inch dual fuel over here. No, I got my. We're gonna just go as quickly as
Well, that's
possible.
how most of us live, so don't.
That's
I
true.
know.
That's true. I
I know,
do count
it's just-
myself amongst the lucky ones in that respect. I get to play with such wonderful toys every day, right? So here we go. We got them all in there. Try to get them in a single layer. Obviously, you want to get them as nicely spread out as you can. But now you're just going to cook them just until they start to brown just a little bit. And I'll show you one here in a second, right? But you want to keep them, you want to keep that temperature pretty high. And when you start seeing a little of this brown around the edge, just around the edges, right? That's good, right?
So what is that,
Now,
kind of like 1 to 2 minutes?
I would say it's probably not more than that. It's maybe a minute at the most, right? We're going to sprinkle we got some chopped garlic, and we've got our shallots. We've got our chopped shallots. We're going to sprinkle that around. Great, smells wonderful. It's always good when you are cooking to have that wonderful smell of that garlic and those onions in there, right? Just cook that briefly. And you can see the scallops are still nice and opaque, right? They're not even cooked all the way through. That's what you're looking for here. Don't let them cook through.
They're not good if they cook through.
No, they're
they're
like
not.
chewing on
Yeah.
on a cross section of a Super Bowl. That's not a good thing.
No, you really don't want overcooked scallops.
So now we're looking for that little bit of brown around the edge. Just you see a little bit there. Now we're seeing the scallop start to brown beautifully. Okay, now here goes. We're gonna add our tomatoes over the top.
We haven't turned the scallops either.
We have not even turned them. We're gonna take our wine. We're gonna add about a half a cup of white wine.
And a glass for me.
Right. Just give them a shake. And now at this point, we just want to let this part reduce just a little bit. But maybe you can see, can you see this, Gabby, how beautiful that scallop looks? Can you see that on the screen? I don't know if
Barely.
here, let me zip it in. Here, just a minute. Come on. I have technology. I can zoom it in.
Yeah. He's got
Here we
magic.
go.
There we
See
go.
how beautiful and just
there. Okay.
there. So you see that? Really nice. And we're going to slip that in. And now all you want to do is let it cook until it just starts to thicken ever so slightly. And it's just right there, just starting to thicken up. Good. Now you want to kill the heat. Take your Italian parsley that you've chopped up really nicely. Now you're going to mix that in. So you can see why you want to have everything ready to go. We're just going to toss this together, right? Just going to give it a toss.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Well, you don't have to do it this way. You can use a tool, right? You can prove yourself a higher form of.
Okay, but you're mixing this all together. You're not
just a little bit at this point. Yep, just mixing it a touch there, Gabby. And now we've got a gratin dish, baking dish. You could use whatever you want. Just want to make something oven safe. Preheated the broiler behind me. We're going to pour our scallops with all of its happiness into this pan. And then just sort of smooth it out like you would if you were baking a cake, right? Just kind of make it in a nice even layer. Okay. All right. That looks beautiful. Smells good. All right. Parmesan cheese.
It only gets better.
I know. So start bringing on the cheeses.
Right. I mean, I'm usually not a big fish and cheese person, but in this case, I'll make an exception. Now here's those dry breadcrumbs. The fresh breadcrumbs.
So
want to put a nice
the
layer.
For browning.
That's right. That's right. And last but not least, I'm going to take a little bit more extra virgin olive oil. I'm just going to drizzle. Just give it a nice drizzle so you can see it. So I'll tip this up so everybody can see, right? But you just got it like that, right? Now this is not one of those sort of make ahead things. You don't want to make this ahead, set it in your refrigerator and then come back and do this later. You want to get it to this point and it's straight into a hot broiler. So got the broiler preheated. Just going to pop that in there. So, if you don't want to do this with scallops, you could certainly substitute some other items in there. You might want to you could steam some different kinds of shellfish. You maybe do some mussels, some clams, put those together, get those pre-cooked. Same idea, right? Just take them, you could leave them in or take them out of the shell. Either way, probably take them out. But then you could spread that in there. You could put some shrimp in there. You could do sort of a little melange of things. But all those flavors that go together with the tomatoes and the garlic and a little bit of the parsley and the Parmesan, they're obviously going to work for all of those items. So it's not.
As you're doing this, I do have a question.
Shoot.
What happens if you wanted to splurge and leave them whole and huge? Would that work or would it not be as good?
It'll work. You just have to probably cook them a little bit longer, right? Give them a little more of a sear before you add your garlic, your shallots, your tomatoes and wine. So let them cook a little bit more. And definitely you're probably going to want to turn each one individually so they're searing a little bit on both sides.
So leave them sliced.
Yeah, I think leaving them sliced is a better idea. But,
Okay.
I'm not to say there's no real rules here.
No, but some things are better a certain way.
I think so.
Yeah,
so. And
that's not a joke. That's for
right. And I think too, if you don't want to make a whole large pan like this, if you have individual gratin dishes, that would be really pretty to do those. Then you could just literally put the scallops into the individual dishes and then bake them on a baking sheet in the broiler just to give them that last little bit of color. So let's just go and see how they're looking. Almost there. We just want to get them, you really just want to get them nice and brown on top. So it's going to take, a couple of minutes. But again, this is just something that you want to serve probably alongside, you know, a nice salad, something green, you know, something fresh to go side by side with this. I don't really think you need to serve a starch with this. I wouldn't, but you could serve it as a first course, I suppose, if you'd like to. But I think as a light supper, this with a little bit of fresh salad would be an ideal way to spend
And
it.
some bread.
And some bread, you know, you could have a nice loaf of French bread or something like that. Would be perfect as a
Yeah.
complement
Yeah.
to this dish. So you can definitely see how this will give you, you know, just a really simple meal, but just really and quick to prepare. All right, we're just starting to get just a little bubbly brown on the cheese, so we're just about there. So yeah, get those scallops. You know, one of the things about scallops too, I always like to remind people is that scallops are one of those fish that's really important to spend the extra money on. Don't buy inexpensive scallops. In other words, if you go to the market and you see scallops and they're advertised at some ridiculously low price, probably meaning that those scallops have been treated with a preservative. Unfortunately, they oftentimes use the same preservative that they use as the active ingredient in floor cleaners. And so that just helps the scallop retain weight.
Yeah.
So obviously,
I know, it always makes you feel good.
that doesn't make you want to just run out and get a big thing of scallops to eat, but you don't want to get those inexpensive scallops. They'll oftentimes have a bluish liquid
Scallop again.
around them. So you want to spend that extra money to get a dry scallop, a dry pack, a day boat, one of those scallops that just is going to cost you a little more, but you're going to really enjoy it more in the end by spending that little bit of extra. All right. There we go. So there I'm going to zoom in for you. They're going to zoom in. Let me get my camera going here. So we've got the scallops just beautifully, just kind of a little bit crispy on the top. So come on, this is such an easy meal to make. So delicious. You might even sneak it past your kids if you don't tell them. You know, and you know, it's interesting too. You know, if you have some vegetarians in your life and you want to do this dish, there's a mushroom called a king oyster mushroom that can easily be sliced just like a scallop, and you can serve that in this same preparation and have a vegetarian version should you want to do that. So there you go.
It sounds and looks wonderful. And you are always fabulous. Haven't quite figured out whether we're showing this March 1st, I think. And if we are, you heard a preview about chicken, which you can find
Chicken,
from
yeah, and
last
that's
week.
going to be an exciting dish too. I think you're going to like that.
Okay, and whatever else you do, please support us by clicking like and subscribe on stircrazyinthekitchen.com. Watch new shows every Monday on the Gabby Gourmet YouTube channel with Chef Ben Davis, Lynn Thielen, both of Broth Living, and me, Gabby. And don't forget both. It'll be on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. And all the recipes are at stircrazyinthekitchen.com. Love you, Ben.
Right.
Love you.
Thanks, Gabby.
I love you
Thanks,
all.
Gab.
See you next
See you
week.
next time.
All right. See you next time.
Okay.